Hello, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast, your personal and or organizational resilience podcast, where we explore the ups and downs of life, how to bounce back stronger, learn from adversity, and understand ultimately that healthy employees create healthy organizations. I'm your host, EB. Today I'm discussing personal resilience and the bouncing back aspect of it. I was having a conversation with a counselee the other day, and we were discussing bouncing back, and the idea of a pogo stick came up. Are you familiar with pogo sticks? These are sticks that have foot pedals on it at the bottom, and there's a spring underneath, and you jump and you kind of bounce. And I remember pogo sticks when I was a kid, and I specifically remember a pogo stick that had a bad spring and it didn't work right all the time. Sometimes it just wouldn't even work. So picture this, you're poised on a pogo stick, filled with excitement, you're ready to soar, but as you push down, anticipating that bounce, that thrilling bounce, right, the spring jams. Worse yet, imagine it breaks entirely. The frustration, the disappointment, the inability to bounce anything, like feelings we all know too well from life's unexpected challenges. And this scenario, it kind of mirrors a gritty showdown between Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed. You know, despite being knocked down, these insurmountable odds, and Rocky's story is one of those of perseverance and relentless pursuit of victory, much like the effort it would take to repair or adapt a pogo stick with a broken... Okay, that's kind of a stretch, I get it. But in life, when our spring breaks, it often feels like we're grounded, unable to bounce back, unable to really engage. You know, what happens when we lose that dream job, when we face that personal loss, when we encounter failure and it doesn't make sense, it doesn't add up, but it's in these moments that the essence of resilience shines brightest. Just as that pogo stick enthusiast might figure out how to fix a broken spring or even replace it to get back to bouncing, we too can find ways to mend our broken parts. We seek help, we learn new skills, we give ourselves time to heal. I mean, there's always a path forward. There's always a way to fix the broken springs. We love those bounce back, comeback stories in movies too. I talked about Rocky Balboa. I'm a huge fan of movies, if you haven't noticed. I'm one of those guys that will watch the Oscars every year. I did this year. The award shows. I think I have subscriptions to just about every movie platform out there. We lost Apollo Creed. We lost Carl Weathers this past year. I remember him from Rocky, but also Happy Gilmore, and a bunch of other action movies. Comparing life's challenges to a pogo stick or these action movies like Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed, their fights, there's something to be said about how does it relate to our ability to bounce back. Sometimes life hits us in ways that we can't necessarily bounce back from. We have to look for another job. There are divorces you have to navigate, so you can't get that relationship back. Other times, there are things that we just have to deal with by facing the truth of it and stop relying on possibilities and the bargaining, as we grieve things, the if-only statements. Sometimes in those cases, we look at the spring as kind of temperamental. It sticks, it's unreliable, it doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. It's just a chance on that day, much like the challenges we face in life. Sometimes those resilience techniques that we have are jammed up and it doesn't really help us bounce back. Resilience isn't about a flawless spring or a trouble-free life. It's about our reaction when faced with adversity. And as I always say, it's about our ability to learn from adversity. This highlights the importance of persistence and learning from each setback. Part of it is identifying what resilience techniques, what resilience support do we have already? Do we have people that we trust? Do we have support? Are we even seeking support? Do we practice mindfulness? Are we learning from the barriers that are in front of us, preventing growth? Are we identifying those boundaries that will help us keep us on the right path? The jammed spring on a pogo stick can halt progress, leaving us feeling stuck and powerless. This mirrors times when, despite our best efforts, our usual strategies for coping and moving forward doesn't seem to work. This type of stagnation, it isn't a sign of failure, but rather a signal that it's time for introspection and adjustment to the current time. Context determines content, right? So anytime we find ourselves in a situation and our usual coping mechanisms aren't working, it might be time to just do an analysis on the situation itself. How is this different from other adversity that we faced? Are you becoming numb to certain coping strategies? Because resilience should be an agile, iterative development, continuous flow of how are we identifying new ways and incorporating new ways to bounce back, to grow stronger, to learn. This actually includes things like our neural pathways. Certain ways that we think about things have been set in our brain, and we have to honestly use a counselor, a therapist, a friend, somebody we can talk to and just really just point out, why are we thinking in the terms that we are? Why are we thinking in the path that we are? A lot of times it's that neural pathway has been set. We only think about it in a certain way. Like, imagine driving home from work every day. We often just think about one way to and from work, one path. We think about the shortest path, or we think about the path where there's less lights. And, sometimes we get stuck in those routine habits of thinking as well. And it's in those moments of realization that the opportunity for true growth emerges. Working on ourselves, be it through seeking new perspectives, embracing change, acquiring new tools for like emotional regulation, somatic markers in our brain, that can help unjam our springs. It can actually help replace certain springs. And just as the pogo stick might need some tinkering or change of parts to function smoothly again, we too might need to reassess and rebuild our approaches to challenges. Maybe we're stuck thinking that relationship has to happen and not realizing, what do I actually deserve in a relationship? How much value do I have in myself? How much confidence and self-esteem is part of the process in your self-improvement and adaptation. Those are the things that kind of refine and build our resilience, making it more robust and responsive to those various contours of our lives. In essence, a jam spring is not about an end, but a beginning. This is a call to delve deeper into yourself, to unearth and repair the underlying issues that impede our ability to bounce back. By acknowledging vulnerabilities, by committing to personal growth, we enhance our resilience, equip ourselves with a more flexible, durable spring that's better prepared to handle the pressures and shocks of life. You have to do the work on yourself. You have to identify what are your values, your ethics, your beliefs, your morals, so when you know you're up against them, what to rely on to get you through that. The journey of self-reflection and development, this is the types of things that ensure that when we push down on that metaphorical pogo stick of life, when we are pressed in adversity, we're met with a bounce that's stronger and more vibrant than before. It's a powerful metaphor. I feel like it worked in counseling. I might have to try it out some more when I talk about resilience. For those times in our lives when our resilience seems to falter, when our ability to bounce back is hindered, by not by a lack of effort, right? If it's broken, like just press harder, no, but some unseen internal blockage is happening. That's what's going on with the pogo stick, with the spring that's stuck. We might find ourselves feeling immobilized by fear, by doubt, or past experiences, or thinking or believing that we'll never have what we had, so we just need to try to stick with it. Those things really weigh heavy on a person, and I've seen this literally thousands of times in a counseling session, in a discussion with friends. Those unspoken or unseen types of things in our psyche. They're like a jamming signal, not a failure, but of a need for introspection and self-work if we allow ourselves to view it that way. The state of being jammed up, it speaks about the nature of personal resilience. And this podcast is both personal resilience and organizational resilience. And I think when we can really build our personal resilience up and figure out ways to get unjammed and unstuck in our personal lives, we're going to carry that into the workplace. Now, it's not a constant or a given. It needs constant maintenance, just like any mechanism. But when our resilience is jammed, it's an indication that, it's time to take a pause. It's time to take a look at the mechanics, the process of our mind, of our thoughts, of our emotions and feelings. And just as you would inspect and oil a jammed spring or replace it if you need to, we need to address our fears. We need our wounds to heal. We need our minds to be recalibrated. It's through that type of self-work that we find tools that enable us to bounce back with greater strength and flexibility. The process of working on ourselves is integral to unjamming our resilience. This journey often involves self-reflection, seeking understanding and compassion for our own vulnerabilities, and acknowledge that growth from facing and overcoming the internal barriers that hold us back. Engaging in practices, like I mentioned, like mindfulness and therapy, and even journaling can be akin to applying oil to those rusted parts of a pogo stick, easing the friction and allowing for a smoother bounce back. Working on ourselves is about building a more robust internal foundation. It's about learning to recognize signs of wear and tear before those springs jam. And by developing a deeper understanding of our emotional and psychological needs, we can proactively maintain our resilience, ensuring that we're ready to face life's challenges with a bounce in our step. This self-work doesn't just unjam our resilience, it enhances it, making each bounce higher and more confident than the last. Now, I will add this as I close up this episode. I often see one of the biggest issues is when we are hurt, we try to hurt other people. It's our insecurity, it's the lack of trust, and there's a lot of fear, which usually results in a lot of anger, which is a result of shame, and all these sorts of things kind of like, once you start peeling back, like you start getting to the root of it all, it's really about how we view ourselves. And it's the expression of ourselves that is taking place, whether we realize it or not, whether we want it or desire that expression of ourselves to be what is expressed. Sometimes it just comes out, and it's because we are in a unhealthy place mentally and emotionally. We're not processing things the way that we need to. And that kind of reminds me of just an inability to bounce back is because we're stuck, and it's because we're stuck in our own head, we're stuck in our own thoughts and our own fears and our own shame. And it's not really what we want to see happen in our lives, but it's like bouncing on that pogo stick and it won't go anywhere. Or we try to, and we just keep trying and we keep trying. And then if it's just a jammed spring that could have been easily fixed, it breaks. And that's what I obviously don't want is for you. I don't want you to break. I want you to be springy. I want you to be able to use some of these techniques and things that I've talked about here and in the other podcast and on the journal to really identify ways. How do you add a little bit more spring to your life? How do you add a little bit more bounce back in your own journey through life? So with that, I leave you. I thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe. Please share this with your friends. I'm really excited about this year and what's happening with barriers and boundaries. So until next time, BB out here.